The distant hum of the Centurion Prime Station's gravity generators was barely perceptible to Alden Carter as he gazed through the viewport at the endless expanse of stars. It had been exactly 23 days since he'd left Earth, the pale blue dot now invisible among the celestial tapestry before him. 23 days since he'd watched the cherry blossoms fall along Tokyo Electric Avenue, their delicate petals swirling in the spring breeze, a final memory of home before departing for the Galactic Alliance Academy. The year was 2473, a full generation since Earth had joined the Alliance. What was once a peaceful planet had been forced to develop specialized nuclear technologies after economic erosion and threats from alien powers. Meanwhile, civilizations like the Vraxim, Takor, and Nur maintained their belief that war is the true measure of strength. They were born and raised in the ashes of intergalactic conflict, knowing nothing else. Alden adjusted his cadet uniform, the silver-blue fabric still stiff and unfamiliar against his skin. His parents had worn the same colors as Alliance officers before they died, defending the front lines from an ambush. That loss had left him haunted by Earth's peaceful values, a constant whisper in his mind amidst the martial drumbeat of the Academy. "Orientation begins in 15 minutes. Earth boy," announced a gruff voice behind him. Alden turned to face Faya Ethar, his Nur roommate. Despite the alien's intimidating exterior, scaled skin and eyes that shifted between amber and crimson, Faya had shown surprising courtesy since Alden's arrival. "I suppose it's time to meet our fellow students," Alden replied with a measured smile. "More like time to be sized up by 36 species of warmongers," Faya said, the ridges above his eyes rising in what Alden had learned was amusement. "They're particularly curious about you, Carter. Earth representatives are rare here." Together, they navigated the sleek corridors of Harmonia Level, the dormitory floor housing species with diplomatic inclinations. The metallic hallways glowed with a cold, indigo light that seemed to emphasize the sterile, machine-like efficiency of the station. Each section featured subtle architectural nods to different species, geometric patterns for the Vraxim, fluid crystalline structures for the Takor. As they approached the Ward of Hemera, the grand hall where the ceremony would take place, Alden felt his pulse quicken. This was why he had come. 2 years after the Alliance had launched its strategic liaison program, he was among the first humans sent to train alongside alien youth, to build bridges across species that had known little but conflict. The hall was already filled with beings from across the galaxy, some humanoid, others defying any terrestrial description. Academy officials in formal attire stood at attention near the podium, their expressions serious and appraising. Alden could feel dozens of eyes tracking his movement as he found his assigned seat. "Welcome, representatives of the 37 allied species," announced a tall figure with the distinctive azure skin and silver hair of the Takor. "I am Lieutenant Colonel Aviar Kryos, your Chief Strategic Instructor. Today marks the beginning of your journey at the Galactic Alliance Academy, the premier institution for military diplomatic training in the quadrant." The ceremony proceeded with formulaic precision. Representatives from each species were called to make brief introductory statements. The Vraxim delegate spoke of her lineage of battle commanders. The Skorvax cadet boasted of his family's conquests during the Great Skorvax War that had only recently ended after 50 bloody years. When Alden's name echoed through the hall, he rose slowly and approached the podium. The silence that fell was heavy with expectation. "I am Alden Carter of Earth," he began, his voice steady despite the flutter in his chest. But instead of reciting his parents' military accomplishments or his own academic merits, he took a different approach. "I come from a planet that, only a few generations ago, nearly destroyed itself with weapons of mass destruction," he said. "Earth's third global war left our cities in ruins, our atmosphere poisoned, our people traumatized." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Some leaned forward, confused by this unconventional introduction. Yet, from those ashes, we didn't forge new weapons. Alden continued. We built a philosophy of peace. We developed satellite technologies that connected, rather than destroyed. We created the very foundation that would eventually help establish the Galactic Alliance. He paused, surveying the room. Earth knows the price of conflict because we've paid it in full. We understand that true strength lies not in how effectively you can destroy an enemy, but in how skillfully you can avoid making enemies in the first place. The silence that followed was absolute. Many of the war-bred aliens stared at him with wide eyes, some in shock, others in what appeared to be revulsion. A group of Wraxham cadets exchanged glances, their expressions ranging from dismissive smirks to curious tilts of their heads. The Takor delegates, known for their warrior feel-pain tradition, seemed particularly attentive, their silver eyes studying him with newfound interest. As Alden returned to his seat, he noticed Lieutenant Colonel Kryos watching him with an unreadable expression. The ceremony continued, but the atmosphere had shifted subtly. Something in his words had struck a nerve. After the proceedings concluded, Alden found himself summoned to Kryos's office, a sparse chamber dominated by tactical displays and ancient weapons mounted on the walls. Cadet Carter, Kryos said without preamble, your speech was provocative. I only spoke the truth about my home, sir, Alden replied. Truth is rarely the point in interspecies relations, Kryos countered. You've already made waves. Some see your peace rhetoric as weakness. Others find it intriguing. Either way, you're drawing attention, and that can be dangerous here. The lieutenant colonel's silver eyes narrowed. Don't disrupt multi-species unity. Your planet has been marginalized before for its peaceful civilization, regardless of its truth. The Academy functions on a delicate balance of competing warrior cultures. Alden felt a surge of confusion, then determination. With respect, sir, it's precisely that determination to protect peace that creates real strength. My parents died defending that principle. And yet here you are, advocating for a philosophy that many believe led to their deaths. Kryos observed coldly. Be careful, Carter. Not everyone appreciates Earth's perspective. As Alden left the office, his mind churned with contradictions. He had come to represent Earth, yet apparently was expected to downplay the very values that defined his home. The realization that merely mentioning Earth's peaceful aspirations could make him a target was jarring. Back in his quarters, he stared at the small holographic image of his parents, both in Alliance uniform, smiling proudly on their last visit home. I won't dishonor what you stood for, he whispered to the silent figures. Even if no one else understands. The following weeks brought a series of challenges designed to test the cadets' strategic thinking and combat readiness. The first major assessment was the simulation wargame, a complex virtual battle scenario against the formidable Skorvax forces. Alden was assigned to the Yitran faction, known for their satellite attack capabilities, ostensibly because his evaluators had noted his strategic harmonization tendencies. As the teams prepared their battle plans, he found himself facing direct ridicule. Earth philosophy won't save you in combat, Carter, sneered Rakthon, a muscular Skorvax cadet with ritual scarification marking his face. Peace is a fantasy for the weak. Interesting perspective from someone role-playing as the losing side, Alden replied evenly, earning surprised looks from his teammates. The simulation began. While other teams focused on brute force assaults, Alden suggested an unconventional approach to his Yitran teammates. We should target their supply lines first, he explained, highlighting various points on the tactical display. Then, deploy disinformation campaigns to create confusion in their command structure. Their warriors are formidable, but their morale can be manipulated. His teammates were skeptical, but agreed to try his strategy. To everyone's surprise, the approach was remarkably effective. The simulated Skorvax forces began to fracture as resource shortages and false intelligence reports spread chaos through their ranks. When the final scores were tallied, Alden's team placed third. Not a victory, but impressive enough that Lieutenant Colonel Kryos took notice. An unorthodox approach, Cadet Carter, the instructor commented during the debriefing. Psychological warfare isn't typically emphasized in these exercises, but you've demonstrated its potential effectiveness. Rakthon glowered from across the room. Coward's tactics, he muttered loudly enough to be heard. Results speak for themselves. Cadet Vark, Kryos replied sharply. Perhaps if your ancestors had considered such strategies, the Great Skorvax War might have ended differently. The comment drew gasps from several cadets. The Skorvax War was still a sensitive topic throughout the Alliance, and Kryos had just used it to defend an Earth cadet's peaceful approach. As Alden left the simulation chamber, he was approached by two cadets who would become central to his academy experience. The first was Lara Vespera, a Takor female with the characteristic silver hair and azure skin of her species. Your strategy was unexpected, she said, studying him with analytical intensity. I'm curious how an Earth cadet developed such insight into psychological warfare. Earth's history is filled with conflicts where the smaller force had to outthink rather than overpower their opponents. Alden explained. We learned the hard way that brute force alone rarely brings lasting victory. The second cadet was Jarek Solis, of Vraxum with the species' distinctive geometric tattoos marking his temples. Unlike most Vraxum, who prided themselves on aggressive posturing, Jarek carried himself with a quiet intensity. My father is General Solis of the Vraxum 10th Fleet, he said without preamble. He would hate your strategy, which is precisely why I find it interesting. These initial connections would grow in significance, though Alden couldn't have known it then. What he did know was that his presence at the Academy was already challenging established paradigms and creating both allies and enemies. His most persistent adversary proved to be Rakthon Vark. The Skorvax cadet seemed to take personal offense at Alden's philosophy, confronting him at every opportunity. Face me in the training sanctum, Rakthon challenged one day in the mess hall, loud enough for all to hear. One-on-one combat. Show everyone what Earth's peaceful warriors are made of. Alden set down his utensils carefully. We're fighting the same battle with different mindsets. Rakthon, I didn't come here to prove myself in personal combat. Because you know you'd lose, Rakthon sneered. Because I know victory in the sanctum wouldn't prove anything worth proving, Alden countered. Judge me by my results in actual strategic assessments, not gladiatorial entertainment. The refusal only intensified Rakthon's contempt. Contemptible, he spat. You'll learn to fear real warriors soon enough. As the days passed, Alden explored more of the Academy's facilities, particularly its vast library. The archive contained millions of holographic records documenting the history, warfare, and customs of hundreds of civilizations. In one section, he discovered artifacts from Earth's own conflicts, including missile fragments from Earth's Third Global War of 2350. Studying your own history? Asked a voice behind him. It was Lara Vespera, her silver eyes reflecting the holographic displays. Someone should, Alden replied, gesturing to the sparse collection. The records on Earth's peace movements are dwindling. Most of what remains focuses on our weapons technology, not the social movements that eventually ended our conflicts. Perhaps because weapons are easier to understand than peace, Lara observed. My people, the Takor, have a saying, pain is universal, compassion is learned. Their conversation was interrupted by Lieutenant Colonel Kryos, who assigned them to work together on a group project, breaching multiplanetary defense systems. The assignment paired them with Jarek Solis and, to Alden's dismay, Rakthon Vark. During their first planning session, the conflict of approaches was immediate. Overwhelming force is the only reliable strategy, Rakthon insisted. Destroy their primary defenses, then their secondary systems while they're in disarray. And sacrifice how many attackers in the process, Alden challenged. What about targeting their economic infrastructure and deploying psychological operations to force them to redirect resources away from defense? Rakthon scoffed. Psychological operations? War is about killing, invasion, subjugation. War is about achieving strategic objectives, Alden countered calmly. If those objectives can be achieved with minimal casualties on both sides, isn't that preferable? Only to the weak, Rakthon snarled. To Alden's surprise, Jarek spoke up in his defense. The Vraxim have lost 3 major campaigns in the last century because we refuse to consider economic warfare. Perhaps there's merit in Carter's approach. Even Lara, despite her Takor heritage of warrior traditions, seemed thoughtful. The psychological component is worth exploring. My family specializes in battle psychology, and fear can be as effective as force in breaking an enemy's will. Their final proposal combined elements of traditional military strategy with Alden's emphasis on psychological and economic warfare. When they presented to Lieutenant Colonel Kryos, the instructor's response was measured but approving. An unusually balanced approach, he noted. The focus on minimizing civilian casualties is novel in Academy strategic planning. Your team receives high marks for practical application and strategic flexibility. Rakthon could barely contain his outrage at the positive assessment. After the presentation, he cornered Alden in the corridor. You've corrupted our assignment with Earth weakness, he hissed. Don't think this success will protect you. The real warriors here see through your facade. As the weeks turned to months, Alden established himself as a respected, if controversial, presence at the Academy. His dormitory on Harmonia level became a gathering place for cadets interested in alternative strategic thinking. Faya Ithar, his Nur roommate, introduced him to meditation techniques that helped maintain mental clarity during crisis simulations. My people were nearly exterminated during the Nur-Vraxim conflict, Faya explained. We survived by cultivating inner strength when our physical defenses failed. Another unexpected ally emerged in Zoran Dreg, a young Skorvax considered disgraced after his family's defeat in the final campaigns of the Great Skorvax War. Unlike Rakthon, Zoran had experienced firsthand the consequences of unyielding aggression. War that leads to a dead end is no path at all, Zoran confided during a late-night strategy session. My father never understood that. He died, believing victory was still possible, even as our homeworld burned. These connections strengthened Alden's resolve, but also deepened his internal conflict. He found himself questioning whether his commitment to peaceful resolution was realistic in a galaxy where so many civilizations had known only conflict for millennia. At night, he often dreamed of his parents, their final smiles as they departed on the mission from which they would never return. In these dreams, they seemed to encourage him, urging him to maintain Earth's spirit even when surrounded by warlike cultures. During a particularly challenging simulation involving multi-species diplomacy, Alden's team encountered the Academy's strategic AI, Mimir 9. The artificial intelligence, named after the Norse god of wisdom, was programmed to evaluate and challenge cadet strategies based on millennia of warfare data. Your proposed resolution has a 73.2% probability of failure, Mimir 9 announced in its neutral tone. Historical precedent suggests the Skorvax population will interpret concessions as weakness and escalate hostilities. Historical precedent doesn't account for cultural evolution, Alden argued. Your analysis lacks psychological and cultural variables that can't be quantified. Specify these variables, the AI demanded. Hope, compassion, the desire for a better future for one's children, Alden replied. Have you integrated those into your models? The AI paused, its holographic interface flickering. Such factors are inconsistent and unreliable in strategic planning. Yet they've shaped every major peace agreement in Earth's history, Alden countered. Run the simulation again, but factor in the psychological impact of offering the Skorvax both security guarantees and economic integration. Remarkably, when these factors were grudgingly incorporated, the success probability rose significantly. Lieutenant Colonel Kryos, observing the exchange, made a note in his evaluation. Carter continues to demonstrate unconventional strategic insight. He wrote, "Potential for specialized diplomatic assignments, though risk of ideological conflict with traditional military structures remains high." As the first academic year progressed, tension continued to build between Alden and the more traditionally militaristic cadets, particularly Rakthon and his circle of Skorvax loyalists. What Alden didn't realize was that this antagonism was developing into something far more dangerous than academic rivalry. Late one night, Jarek Solis sought out Alden with troubling information. "Rakthon is planning something," the Vraxim cadet warned, his geometric tattoos seeming to pulse in the dim light of Alden's quarters. "My sources tell me he's been meeting with Skorvax officers, not affiliated with the Academy. There's talk of making an example during the upcoming Alliance Day ceremony." "Making an example of whom?" Alden asked, though he suspected the answer. "You," Jarek confirmed grimly. "Your speech about Earth's peaceful values has been circulating beyond the Academy. Some see it as a threat to the military-industrial complex that's sustained many species through centuries of conflict." Alden absorbed this information with a calmness that surprised even himself. "What do they plan to do?" "Disrupt your presentation at the ceremony. Create chaos. Make the Alliance look weak and divided," Jarek explained. "The details aren't clear, but the intent is." "Thank you for warning me," Alden said sincerely. "Why take the risk of telling me this?" Jarek's expression hardened. "Because despite my heritage, I've seen enough of war. My father glorifies our conquests, but never speaks of the nightmares that wake him screaming. The Vraxim way isn't the only way, perhaps not even the best way." The Alliance Day ceremony was the Academy's most significant annual event, drawing high-ranking officials, dignitaries, and media from across the Alliance. As a top-performing first-year cadet, Alden had been selected to deliver a presentation on interplanetary diplomatic strategy, a rare honor that had further inflamed Rakthon's resentment. In the days leading up to the ceremony, Alden prepared meticulously, working with Lara Vespera to craft a message that would resonate across species without triggering defensive reactions. "The key is to emphasize mutual benefit," Lara advised, her analytical mind dissecting each phrase for potential cultural landmines. "Even the most aggressive species respond to self-interest." The Grand Hall was filled to capacity when the day arrived. Alliance flags representing 37 species hung from the vaulted ceiling, a visual reminder of the fragile unity that had been forged after centuries of conflict. Senior military officers, politicians, and Academy leadership occupied the front rows, their formal attire glittering with medals and insignia of rank. As Alden waited his turn to speak, he scanned the crowd discreetly, noting Rakthon and several other Skorvax cadets positioned near the main signal relay stations. Their posture seemed too alert, too focused. Jarek's warning echoed in his mind. When his name was announced, Alden approached the podium with measured steps. The speech he had prepared emphasized collaboration, drawing on Earth's painful history to illustrate the costs of conflict and the benefits of cooperation. "The greatest value of the Alliance lies not in our combined military might," he began, "but in our commitment to standing together despite our differences. Earth learned through devastating loss that weapons alone cannot secure a future worth having." As he spoke, he noticed subtle movement near the signal relays. Rakthon and two other Skorvax were manipulating something beneath their uniforms. With a jolt of realization, Alden understood they were preparing to hack the transmission system, likely to cut his speech and replace it with propaganda that would embarrass the Alliance leadership. Without breaking his speech, Alden shifted his position, angling toward the nearest security officer while continuing to address the audience. He needed to act, but doing so would mean abandoning his presentation, potentially creating exactly the kind of disruption Rakthon wanted. The decision was made for him when he saw Rakthon activate a device. In an instant, Alden leapt from the podium, shouting a warning as he rushed toward the Skorvax cadet. Security personnel, initially confused, quickly followed his lead as the situation became clear. Rakthon, realizing he'd been discovered, abandoned subtlety. "For Skorvax supremacy!" he bellowed, lunging at Alden with a concealed blade. The two cadets collided in the center of the hall, grappling as dignitaries scattered and security forces converged. Alden found himself in the position he had always sought to avoid, locked in physical combat, with Rakthon's superior strength giving the Skorvax a decisive advantage. With a powerful move, Rakthon pinned Alden to the ground, blade poised for a killing strike. In that moment, time seemed to slow. Alden could see the hatred in his opponent's eyes, the absolute conviction that violence was the only path to glory. Alden had a combat knife concealed in his boot, standard issue for all cadets. One quick movement, and he could end Rakthon's threat permanently. It would be justified self-defense, witnessed by hundreds. But that was not Earth's way, not his way. Instead, Alden looked directly into Rakthon's eyes and spoke with quiet intensity. "If Skorvax dismisses the Alliance network, you will be the ones to wither before new worlds can even stir." The unexpected response momentarily confused Rakthon, creating the opening Alden needed. With a defensive technique taught by Faya Ithar, he deflected the blade and broke free, rolling away as security officers swarmed Rakthon and his conspirators. The aftermath was immediate and dramatic. Many Skorvax cadets backed away, suddenly confronted with the power of words, something they had dismissed as meaningless compared to physical might. The psychological impact was visible. Some warriors stood frozen, others visibly trembled, overwhelmed by the realization that their worldview might be fundamentally flawed. Alliance officials quickly took control of the situation, apprehending Rakthon and his accomplices. The Academy's headmaster, a distinguished near-diplomat, approached Alden amidst the chaos. "You've prevented what could have been the most significant internal revolt in 20 years. Cadet Carter," the headmaster acknowledged, presenting Alden with the Youth Peace Medal, a recognition rarely bestowed on first-year cadets. Yet amidst the congratulations, there were also criticisms. "You nearly killed a fellow Skorvax right there," one senior Alliance official noted gravely. "Your methods, they may cost us their trust in the Alliance." Alden accepted both the medal and the criticism with equal humility. "I chose not to take a life when I could have," he replied. "If that decision costs us trust, perhaps it's trust we never truly had." The incident marked a turning point, not just for Alden, but for the Academy itself. In the following weeks, a series of policy changes were announced, expanding the Earth Alliance Cultural Exchange Program. Alden and Laura Vespera were tasked with presenting lectures on basic peace education in various species lecture halls. Perhaps most surprisingly, the traditionally hostile Vraxum and Skorvax representatives proposed a joint, curated exhibit of non-lethal technologies, where Alden displayed the prototype Peacekeeper drone he had developed with a team of like-minded cadets. His relationships with Laura and Jarek deepened through these initiatives. Laura discovered Alden possessed an unusual, empathic perception, an ability to understand the deeper motivations driving warriors toward conflict. Together, they crafted presentations that addressed these root causes, rather than just advocating for peace as an abstract ideal. Jarek became an invaluable, emotional translator, helping bridge the gap between Earth's peace philosophy and the warrior culture's mindset. They need to hear your message in their own language, he explained. Not just words, but concepts they can grasp through their own cultural framework. Despite these successes, Alden struggled with internal conflict. Though hailed as a peace hero, he remained troubled by his decision not to use decisive force against Rakthon. Is there ever a time when the sword must be drawn to protect peace? He asked himself repeatedly. The pressure from Alliance leadership added to his turmoil. If you want to advance, you must prove Earth knows how to deter as well as reconcile, one director told him bluntly. These tensions manifested in restless nights, with Alden dreaming of Earth's wars repeating across the universe, the sound of bombs intermingling with lullabies. As the academic year drew to a close, Alden and his growing team of Earth Peace Division cadets compiled a comprehensive report titled Peace as Strategy. The document presented data on the economic, human, and psychological costs of intergalactic conflicts, comparing them with the prosperity achieved through cooperation. We're not advocating for disarmament, Alden explained during the presentation to Alliance leadership. We're proposing strategic de-escalation trials in controlled environments, where the benefits can be measured and quantified. To his surprise and gratification, the Galactic Alliance agreed to implement the strategic de-escalation trials at a newly established outpost called Nova Pax Base, a frontier region where Skorvax and Vraxim forces would collaborate on economic development rather than military positioning. Alden was appointed Youth Alliance envoy, tasked with persuading other species to join the program. Meanwhile, Rakthon was sentenced to exile at the Karathax outpost, where he would relearn peace, a form of labor imprisonment combined with education. On the eve of his departure for his first diplomatic mission, Alden stood alone in the observation deck, gazing at the distant planet Pandora. His thoughts turned to how far he had come since arriving at the Academy. From an isolated Earth cadet to someone whose ideas were reshaping Alliance policy. The galaxy may not fully understand Earth's message yet, he murmured to himself. But at least they've come to respect the young man from that wild planet. He smiled, remembering his mother's words before her final mission. Use your heart as the sharpest sword. As the stars stretched before him, Alden felt a renewed sense of purpose. The path ahead would not be easy. Centuries of ingrained warrior culture could not be transformed overnight. But for the first time since joining the Academy, he believed genuine change was possible. The cherry blossoms of Earth might be light years away, but their spirit of renewal lived on through him, a quiet strength that had made even war-bred aliens shudder when confronted with its power. For peace and honor, he whispered, touching the small seal that had belonged to his parents, the same one he had raised before the assembled dignitaries instead of a weapon. Behind him, the cold indigo light of the station corridors seemed to warm just slightly, as if the universe itself acknowledged the shift taking place. One cadet, one conversation, one connection at a time. Time to begin, Alden said to himself, turning toward the future with quiet determination. And somewhere in the vast reaches of space, Earth continued its silent orbit, its lessons of hard-won peace rippling outward through its most dedicated sun.